it made me, when I saw when I truly felt and saw the way that I had been in my life, I knew that I wanted to be better than I'd ever been, you know? And so that was like, if I had never gone through that, I wouldn't have known how good I wanted to be.
I'm really just thankful to have you with me today, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Of course.
Yeah.
So your name is Brendan Vaughn, right?
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about kind of your life, like in terms of your childhood, high school, junior high?
Yeah, I was born in Boise.
Okay.
I grew up in Pocatello, going to Hawthorne.
Yep.
And then,
That's where we met.
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And then a lot of the same people went to Highland.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean, I loved school. I had a good time, and was always like thinking about, I had this idea that, when I turn 18, that it was like, I wanted to do everything I could to prepare for that.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that was like making money and working and doing stuff in school to put me ahead, and so that I'd have a lot of credits by the time that I graduated. So I was preparing to go to school, you know?
Mm-hmm. And what did you, like, what was your aspirations in terms of like a job when you were in high school?
I started welding.
Okay.
Yeah.
Way cool.
Yeah, and then I had half day for the last couple of years of school. I was going to ISU.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other friends too. And it was a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you started welding, and then what happened after high school? Did you still pursue welding? What was...
Well, I weld personally and do like projects because I like to build stuff.
Okay.
But the day after graduation, I left on a 1-week trip to visit Jeremy, good friend.
Oh, yeah.
He had moved away. And so we went to surprise him in Sausalito, California.
Okay.
In the Bay. And that week, we were just going to stay a week. We took my car. And during that week, I felt love and happiness like I'd never felt before.
Mm-hmm.
And something told me that I needed to stay.
Okay.
And I had just learned about like the law of manifestation, and immediately I'm putting it to work. You know, I walk to the park and I'm like, I'm gonna meet somebody amazing today. You know?
Wow.
And I walk up to I meet this guy named Bright.
Okay.
And he's like a really interesting traveler guy telling me stories, and yeah, something said that I couldn't go back to Pocatello then.
Wow.
And Jeremy's brother blessed me, said I could stay and put together a backpack to start traveling. And Clint took my car back to Idaho for me.
Okay.
And I still remember looking at the back of the car as it was driving away with Clint in it, and I actually had tears in my eyes.
Wow.
Because I just didn't know what was happening, you know, and I didn't know all I knew is that I needed to do it, you know.
Yeah.
Needed to stay and continue whatever was happening.
So after you got your backpack put together, where was your first journey after California?
No, I started heading north. There was I caught a ride share out of the Bay, and I was actually, there was this music festival that I was meeting my brother and some other friends at in Washington.
Okay.
Called Paradiso, and this was in 2017.
Okay.
And on our way, I meet up with some random people off of Craigslist to catch this ride. And suddenly, we're like cruising, and I don't know the area.
Yeah.
You know, this is my first time really going through this, and suddenly we're coming into Eugene, and I was like, I know Eugene. I was like, I had no idea that we were gonna be passing Eugene, you know.
Mm.
And I was like, drop me off here. So they just pull right out of the freeway, drop me off, and I start walking, and I'm just I'm radiating, and I'm
Uh-huh.
and I pull out my phone and I message another good friend, and I'm like, yo, what's up? Where are you at? And I'm just like, well, I'll just start walking in this direction and see, I don't know if he hits me up, And I remember I saw this person on the street. It was like kind of like a cloudy day, and they were on the other side of the street, and they were like, wow, you're so bright on this day, they told me.
Oh, wow.
And I was just like radiant and shining, Such a freaking good time. I was like, I had not knowing what was going to happen, there was no plan.
Yeah.
And then I ended up meeting up with the homies, and I pitched a tent in Eugene and in the homies' backyard, and this was a really like pivotal grounding to the start, I fell in love with Eugene, and that I knew that I needed to go back there.
Okay.
And Eugene is also like glass blowing, like one of the glass blowing capitals of the world.
Yeah.
And I grew up blowing glass, and so I knew that after I'd been there and seen what was going on, I knew I wanted to come back and blow some glass.
That is way cool.
Yeah.
I remember you blowing glass. I feel like in junior high. Was it in junior high when you started?
Yeah.
Wow. That's way cool. While I'm on this subject now, it just popped in my head. Tell me about your hat.
Oh yeah. All right. Last year I was traveling Europe.
Okay.
And my partner at the time, her ancestors came from Sicily.
Okay.
Which is an island off the coast of Italy. And so we wanted to go visit her hometown, and we did. We arrived in Catania, which is one of the main places to fly into in Sicily. And it was actually a big journey that we went through in Sicily. We started hitchhiking, sleeping, and at this time we were sleeping anywhere and everywhere.
Wow.
In the middle of a roundabout. Anywhere. Anywhere there was a good spot, we'd just sleep it,
Wow.
And we started we met some really awesome people. We were going to this castle actually in an evening.
Okay.
And we just wanted to check out the castle.
Yeah.
And when we got there, there's a bunch of stuff, a bunch of people going on. And turns out that we arrived the same night that this busking festival was happening. Busking is street performance, people who are playing guitar, doing acts and things and stuff. And so there's some of the most amazing circus performers I've ever seen. And I'm super into circus, I juggle clubs and I spin fire and a bunch of different things. And so this was crazy, and we're like, whoa, this is all meant to be. Let's kick it here this weekend. And there's live music, we were dancing, I love to dance. And we met some really amazing locals, and they even hosted us.
Wow.
And then they told us about a place where two waters meet, and you can see the two different flows of water in the ocean, in the Mediterranean. So we start hitchhiking, and it's funny, when we started hitchhiking, actually, somebody pulls over, and it's one of the guys we meet with his mom that's going in the same direction. And
wow.
Was crazy, I don't know, a wild alignment that he just happened to be going, and we had met, and we hadn't talked before. He just saw us on the side of the road.
Wow.
But we ended up hitchhiking around the whole island. And Sicilian people are incredibly nice. Some of the best hitchhiking that I've ever had.
Really?
Yeah, and we got to the other side of the island, and sometimes when we're catching rides and stuff, we're just scoping okay, where's a possible place, to sleep or something.
Yeah.
And then we get out, and there's this dumpster with a whole bunch of clothes, and we're like, that's weird. And then I see this hat on the ground. And I'm like, what? And I picked this thing up off the ground, and I'm like, no way. And then I was like, that's kind of weird that I put it right on my head. And I felt a little itchy, and I was like, is it the hat? Or no, I was like, no, I was itchy before. And
you trick your mind, right?
And so I started rocking this hat, and it was getting a little bit cold too, and it was perfect. And it's just it's been rocking with me since Sicily, I just found it on the street.
That is way cool. And it looks like it fits your head perfect.
Yeah,
it was
really
meant
nice.
to be. It was calling your name.
Yeah.
In just a line. Perfect. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was a good time.
Well, I've got quite a bit of questions, okay? So, you've shared some of your travel experiences. How I guess out of all the experiences that you've been on, what was your most memorable experience? Like a time that
Well,
you went through a lot of trials and like I want to hear like your most
yeah. There's
memorable experience.
there's a lot of good ones,
Okay.
but before you even mentioned trials and stuff, this one came to mind.
Okay.
And how did I find this place? Okay, I went to a rainbow gathering in California, my first rainbow gathering.
Okay.
It was after I met an amazing group of people, and we're still friends now, all those years ago. And they like introduced me to the rainbow. And coming out of the rainbow, I was like, I had been told about trimming. And it's like a common job in Northern California, trimming marijuana.
Yep.
And so I start hitchhiking across Northern California, and I'm hitchhiking with this other brother, this is Israeli brother. And another brother picks us up, and he's Israeli.
Oh, wow.
And he says, "Oh, I'm actually going to a farm right now." He's like, "I'll see if you guys can come." And he introduced me to a majul date.
So what is a jewel date?
Dates are like this really delicious fruit from a palm tree.
Oh, wow.
A date palm.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's famous in the Middle East. And dates are delicious. Well, we end up going to this farm, and it was amazing. It was like one of my first experiences being around like foreign language, and everyone was from Israel and was speaking Hebrew.
Oh, wow.
And so we'll all be in the river, and everyone's speaking Hebrew, and I'm just enjoying myself, not understanding a single thing what's going on, but it was a good time, And I end up meeting this brother there who leads me to another farm. I do this work here. We end up going to this other farm, and where was I? Can you remind me what was the
most memorable experience?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm at this other farm, and we're working like 15-hour days. We like wake up in the dark and go to sleep in the dark working. And there was this woman, Claire, there, and I said, "Oh, yeah, I feel like crying." And she said, "You should go cry." And I was like, "All right." And I put my scissors down, and I went out, and we were like way up in the mountains. And I walked down the road a bit, and there was the moon was shining, and I just thought about the pain that I had caused the people that I loved the most. And specifically an old partner. And this was like the beginning of my travels. So it was a lot about like finding my happiness again, and like processing the difficulties that I went through. And and I just thought about every way that I had hurt her, and that I had done it to the person that I love the most. And I was on the ground crying.
Wow.
But I was like ready to look at every one of those situations, and that's what I was there for. That's why I needed to start traveling. I needed to face out everything, I needed to look at everything and make that a focus.
Yeah.
And so that was a really beautiful memory that I have of like going out there, like willing and ready to like look at what was going on and feel it.
Yeah.
Wow. That's what's a memory.
So, I mean, in that moment, were you like very grounded with yourself? Like, just very in tune with what was going on mentally, spiritually, in your life? Yeah.
I was reading a lot and like being present, and like, because I didn't know what I was doing, where I was going, and like I was just flowing and meeting amazing people, and like, because I was so excited with life, but also like in the excitement with life, it gave me like the strength to look at the things that were the hardest.
So going through those experiences, definitely, the I guess not the bad experiences, but just like your past experiences at that moment were able to help you kind of move forward, right?
Yeah.
And kind of get that off your shoulders, right?
Yeah. And I mean, I wouldn't be who I am now without those things,
Yeah.
And it really, it made me, when I saw when I truly felt and saw the way that I had been in my life, I knew that I wanted to be better than I'd ever been.
Yeah.
And so that was like, if I had never gone through that, I wouldn't have known how good I wanted to be, you know?
Well, to me, brother, you're a very inspiring person.
Thanks.
Yes, you are, man. I mean, I've told you probably like so many times about how amazed I am of all the things that you've accomplished in the short 6 years of graduating high school. So how many total countries have you been to?
It's 22 now.
22. And I guess in terms of all the places you've been, all the different countries, what is your most, I guess, what's your favorite travel experience or favorite country to travel to?
I've had this question before, I know.
Really?
And it's hard.
It's hard.
It's hard because there's a lot of good ones, you know, and they have different, they're different. Cultures are so different.
Yeah.
Mountains,
Yeah.
deserts, like, but I have like a couple that immediately come to mind that I love, or a few actually. And it's Thailand,
Okay.
and India, and Italy.
Wow.
And or like specifically the Alps.
The Alps.
Yeah.
That is like the Alpatians.
No, the Alps are the mountains in Europe.
Okay.
There's a couple different mountain chains: the Balkans, the Alps, and like the Pyrenees.
Okay.
But the Alps are like, they go through France, Italy, Switzerland, Austria. They're in, like, I think there's some Alps in German Alps, and that's amazing mountain. I love the mountains.
So you hike, correct?
Yeah.
So you've hiked multiple Alps mountain ranges, or
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, I've hiked in Switzerland, Italy, and France, and then I've hiked in the Balkans and Eastern Europe.
Okay. That's
in
amazing.
Macedonia, Bulgaria, and hitchhiked in those countries in Greece. And
So is there when you're in some of these different countries, how are you able to communicate with people that don't speak English, or do people speak English?
there are people who do, and there's sometimes they don't. You know?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's basic.
Yeah.
And like, if you're trying to get food, you know, you're like, you know, you point and
Yeah.
maybe learn a word or something. You know, like
Yeah.
if there's any dietary restrictions, like I'm usually eating vegetarian, so I try to communicate that.
Yeah.
And I've definitely eaten meat because the communication didn't go out well.
So what I guess, well, you know, another thing is what has motivated you to eat vegetarian?
Yeah, actually, it started when I first started traveling,
Okay.
because I had this drive that I wanted to be as high as possible, sober.
Okay.
And I felt that by eating meat is dense, and it takes a lot of energy to digest.
Yeah.
And so I thought, if I eat the simplest things that I could, that'll have the highest energy. And so I started off like raw vegan, and I felt super high and amazing, you know, and I'm feeling everything and a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. And this was like the beginning. That was what the drive was, because at first I wanted to eat meat, you know, like someone's next to me eating something and I'm smelling it, and like I want it, you know.
Yeah.
But then the drive that was in me was, no, like, I want to be as high as possible, and like it's also an experiment, you know, because we don't really know how we're gonna feel until we do it.
Yeah.
And I felt good, so that was the start. And then over years, you know, it's like it's developed, and I appreciate like reducing suffering in the world. And I think about like how I've lived vegan and vegetarian now, and I don't have to kill animals and eat them. So knowing that I don't have to, but it's a choice. So most of the time I choose to not, you know.
It's like peace, not eating, you know, meat, like, you know, from what I'm understanding.
Yeah.
Right. That's amazing. Like that makes me want to be vegetarian. I'm being serious.
It feels good, you know, and meat can be really good too.
Yeah.
And about like, I think most of us usually eat too much, and it's okay to eat it less.
Yeah. Definitely, like when you look at like portion sizes, like at restaurants, like it's like 3/4 the plate or half the plate is your steak or meat, and then you've got like a little, you know, section of like 1/4 of the plate of your veggies, right?
Yeah.
And it probably should be switched around, right?
Yeah, I've met so many people doing different lifestyles, and it really, I think whatever works for us, works, you know.
Yeah.
But it's nice to like try different things out, and to see what works for us. And I've done like a lot of different fasting and like experimented with what works for me, you know.
So what type of fasting have you done?
I've done my 24-hour dry fasting. I've done 3 days water fasting, 1 week water fasting, and I've done a bunch of intermittent fasting. Where like I did this period of time where I would do 1 week at a time of a certain hour schedule of intermittent fasting. So something from like a 12-12, like 12 hours eating, 12 hours not eating, and I'd do that for a week. And then I'd try like 8 or 9 hours and do that for a week. And then I went down to like where I was only eating for 4 hours a day. And then I tried each one for a week to see how it would affect my body.
And which one do you think had the most benefits for you personally?
Like 8 or 9 hours of eating was the optimal. 4 hours was like I was just eating for 4 hours straight.
So you probably have this big ass table of just food, and I can just imagine you just going to town. You know?
I was like, yeah, I'm moving a lot and I burn a lot of calories, and yeah, but 8 hours is pretty optimal.
Wow, that's so cool, man.
I tested not just those periods of time, but what period of the day is that 8 hours in. And so I tried like morning fast, like where I'd fast in the mornings and eat later in the day, or where I'd eat in the mornings and then fast later in the day. And for me too, it was much easier for me to fast in the mornings. I wake up, I don't eat until like 2 p.m. or something like this. It was much easier for me to eat at the end of the day because I usually like to eat not far from when I go to sleep.
So one thing that you also had mentioned was the high off like eating vegetarian. So, you know, I know that you've done some rock climbing, some paragliding. So is that all because of the high that it gives you?
A lot of it actually, yeah, I feel freaking good when I'm doing it. And I think that's part of once I start doing it, like I love it. As you're focused, you know. And with rock climbing and flying, like everything else can disappear, you know. And especially like when you're really fighting for something. And I like I climb like multi-pitch, and where I'm out for like 12-14 hours on a single climb doing big walls. And there's moments where like there's just nothing else going on, and it's just you and like the quiet mountains. And sometimes, you know, you're climbing with somebody or you're climbing solo, and you just know, like, you don't even know what just happened on this last pitch. All you know is that you did everything you possibly could to get up it, you know? And like, which is some crazy stuff. I've shoved my head inside of cracks in the rock and like used my head to shimmy myself and like all these crazy positions, you know? And when you're in there, you're not thinking about anything else, you know?
Yeah.
Just not falling.
So you have a fascination for paragliding, right?
Yeah.
Tell us kind of some of your experiences with paragliding.
It started by an article that I read.
Okay.
And it was a report of these two paragliding ice climbers in the Karakorums, which are like big mountains in Pakistan.
Okay.
And they were doing a first ascent of this big mountain. And usually it takes 3 days to hike in, 3 days to hike out, and thousands of feet of elevation gain. And then they flew in paragliding, landed at the base of this mountain, climbed to the top, did the first ascent, climbed down and flew out, and we're like back in town the same day from the time they started climbing. They climbed up, climbed down, and then back in town. And it was this crazy adventure. And I just like, I knew that I had a friend too that I picked up hitchhiking years ago, and we've stayed in contact since. And he's a pilot, and I knew I wanted to fly. And reading this, I was like, oh man, I want to do this. You know, that sounds crazy. It's super expensive to get into, is what I was told.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, okay, you know, I gotta like see when I feel like investing that. And this year when I was in India, I was hiking, climbing, meeting amazing people, and actually my bag got stolen, and I lost like my passport, my ID, my debit card, credit card, phone, and I was actually traveling. I broke my phone climbing, and decided that it wasn't something that I was interested in investing in, so I just didn't replace it. And so I was just traveling phoneless, and my bag got taken. It was like right behind me at this hot spring, and I walked away from that actually thinking, how do I want to respond to this? Because it's like a little shock, and it was like I'd never lost like all my documents in any way that I could possibly get money. And I wanted to just trust in the universe that it was what was meant to happen, you know? And so I said, that's how I want to respond to this. And I got back like to my homie. We were supposed to be leaving like 7 hours later like it's early in the morning. We were going to like move towns and go rock climbing in this new place. Yeah. And I woke him up and said, hey man, like we can't leave. Like I got to deal with talking to the police and stuff and about trying to find my bag. And so during this week, it was like a big process dealing with police, and we were super blessed by these amazing brothers at this, like, it was way up on the mountain. We found this place out of sheer alignment. We were like, it was raining when we arrived in this mountain town, and we just started going up the mountain, and suddenly we find ourselves at a dead end, and there's this like room that's completely clear. Like all the walls and the outside and the roof is all clear, but it was out of the rain. So we go inside and we meet like some really amazing people, and they tell us we can pitch a tent for free.
Oh wow!
So we started living there, and like we were basing like all of our hikes out of this little town. And well, we're staying there, and we're like paragliding comes up, and someone tells us, oh, in Birbillion, India, it's famous paragliding, some of the best paragliding in the world. And I'm like, no way. And so I started looking into it, and training there is ridiculously cheap.
Really?
Yeah, so cheap.
Like how much?
Like in the United States, it's like $3,000 or $4,000, and here it was like $350.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
Okay.
And I was like, all right, like that's sick. Yeah. And then we're like, okay, we have these climbing missions and hiking missions that we still wanted to go on, but when the day came, like the bag was gone, and decided like it wasn't coming back around. And so we head out with these idea to go to this new city. We were actually going to hike over these mountains instead of going around the road. We were going to hike over these mountains and drop into another valley to the place we were going to climb. And Gabriel says, because we had been in that spot, for a little bit. He says, we could do anything. And I was like, we could do anything. So we're eating some food at the restaurant right before we're headed out, and we were like looking at the options, and I just put it like, and I like doing this. I'm like, okay, like option number one, we follow the plan we're gonna do. We hike over these mountains, and we make it to the rock climbing place. Option two, like we skip hiking, we take the bus, or like option three, we had some other homies that were going to this place called Manala, and we go hiking with them before. And then one of the last option was we drop everything and we go to Birbillion and start paragliding. And just like now, the excitement was unreal, Yeah. And he looked at me and he's like, oh yeah, that was obvious. The option was obvious, yeah. And so like we walked out of the restaurant, and in India, you don't have to like pre-book a bus ticket or plan for anything. There's like, you can just walk out on the street and just start walking. And there's so many buses like going everywhere, or one city to the next, that like you just wait until the bus passes by and jump on it, like wave them down. It's pretty awesome. So we just like, boom, we started heading straight to Birbillion. And when we arrived, actually, so there's like someone approaches us on the street and trying to like they want to teach us, So we sit down, we talk. Well, their prices are really cheaper than any other prices that I'd seen online either, and the phone calls I was making. But I said, hey, I want to like walk around and see what's going on first, and like meet some more people. These guys are really nice. So we exchanged information. They said, oh, we'll actually take you to the landing site, and there'll be a bunch of people there that you can talk with. So we hop in and we go to the landing site, and right as we're pulling up, I'm like, wow, that looks like George. And he's like, wow, that's funny, he does. And then I was like, he even has like hippie pants on. And I was like, and I get out and I'm like, no fucking way, that's George. And this is amazing. We were at the Rainbow in India, and there was two other rock climbing buddies there, like that we had just met. But they're like full on climbers. And we split after the Rainbow, and Gabriel and I now we're in Birbillion, and it's freaking George and Rocky. Rocky comes flying out of the sky.
Oh wow!
It turns out these two are learning from the same people we were just talking with.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and we're like, oh, this is meant to be.
What I want to point out real quick is how everything is aligning up. All the unexpected things on your journey just are meant to happen, it seems like, right? So keep going. So I'd be like,
Well, that's what it feels like. It just gets amazing synchronicities. And that's also, it helps confirm like that you're in the right place when those things happen.
I mean, I definitely have moments like that too, but sorry.
No, you're great. So yeah, we decided we'd start paragliding there. Like this guy, we didn't need to look at any other options. You know, this is totally meant to be. And after that couple weeks of staying in Beer, I fell in love with flying. You know, and we had all these plans, like some more like trekking and rock climbing, in Manali, like in Himachal Pradesh, Ladakh, Kashmir, Jammu, and then I was planning to go to Nepal for the Nepal Rainbow in September. But I couldn't even get paragliding out of my heart. And I started I was like, where is the best places in the world at this season? Because the season in India ended. In Beer, there's like a period during the monsoon season that you can't fly. The cloud base is too low and there's no visibility. So I found, like flying in Europe and the Alps and the Balkans right now is optimal season, you know? And so I found a wing on Facebook. Like I went to this paragliding European page and like started talking to this Italian guy who had a whole kit at the best deal that I've ever seen too. So cheap, like my harness, my wing, my reserve parachute, backpack. And, he was super nice. You know, I still had no passport and like no way to get money. The only way I was getting money is like I actually had like a rolling tab with my friend because he was having he had difficulties getting money before, and so he had a rolling tab with me. And then as soon as I lose all my stuff, he gets access to money. So then I have a rolling tab with him. And then eventually like my parents are like PayPaling people, and then people I meet traveling will pull out money for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It was pretty crazy because there was some periods of time where I just didn't have money.
Well, on the topic of money, I mean, how can one person like fund like doing all these experiences that you're, with traveling?
I think it's actually like less about making money for me and more about not spending it.
Just not spending it.
Because I live so cheap. And the only stuff that I buy is stuff that like I really utilize, like maybe this jacket. And I like quality gear because it serves me in a wide range of places and for a long time. And so I spend most of my money on equipment, but only essential equipment. But then the rest of my money, I try to never pay for accommodation, and I only pay for food. And I do a lot of hitchhiking and don't pay for transportation either. And if I do, and I'm flying to different countries, I'll find I won't choose the date really I want to fly. I choose the dates that are the cheapest. And then I stay for so long that this year was the most expensive plane tickets that I had, and they were around $650 each way. And they can always find cheaper than that. But there was this gig that I had coming into Thailand this year that I needed to be there at a specific time. But I'll stay for so long that you're spending if you spend $1,300 on plane tickets, but it's 7 months, So split over those months, you're only spending $100, $200 a month, on transportation. But this year, traveling 7 months abroad in Asia, India, and Europe, I spent $4,500, and that was including my paragliding gear, which was $1,000.
Wow.
And yeah, so I live super cheap. And even my first time traveling abroad, I was in Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and Taiwan, and France. And I spent $2,000 in 6 months, including airfare.
That is insane. I'm I spend $2,000 a month. I know. At least $2,000 a month.
It's cheaper. It's cheaper to actually the traveling lifestyle is cheaper than the bill lifestyle. Wow. It's having some place and paying a car payment, paying for house payment, insurance, it all adds up,
So one thing that I also want to ask about is, I believe you mentioned that you own a house, right?
I have a tiny house, yeah.
And where's that house located?
It's parked in in the desert in Southern California.
Way cool.
Yeah.
How did you come about that house?
I actually built a tiny house for the first time 3-4 years ago. And I wanted like something. I've always been interested in never having debt.
Yeah.
And I remember like riding in my dad's car and there being like some radio station on that was always talking about like living debt free, you know?
Yeah.
And so I knew I wanted to build something that I could live in, but that I had never had debt. And so I built my first tiny house. And this tiny house, I made a list of what would I want in my dream home. And then I built a house around that. And once I dried it out, like I framed it, doors, windows, siding, roofing, everything is on a trailer. Well, I left and was traveling and realized that it was way too big. And I was like, I don't even want to move this thing. And I just sold it on the spot right there. Like some people came and picked it up themselves. And so then it led me into knowing that I wanted to build another tiny house because I just like building. I like seeing things come into creation. And so then this tiny house came in and I lived in it last year for 4 months, which was like one of the second longest I'd been in one place in the last 6 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And it was really nice and amazing things happened. You know, I started blowing glass again and built my like mobile glass blowing studio. Yeah. So now like this tiny house is sitting there and like, I live like so on the flow and I'm never in places, but I have, you know, I want the potential stability and like someday I want to have a family. Yeah. And so, but I also still want to live the lifestyle that I do. And so I'm slowly like, I have an idea that if I build houses and create rental properties and things and like have like this certain amount of income and stability, that then when I am ready for a family, I can still live the lifestyle that I do. And so a tiny house is something like that for me. Yeah. You know, and so I'll just continue to build more of them and rent them and Airbnb them.
That's like freaking awesome, man.
Yeah.
So did you fly into Boise recently?
Yeah. I got back to the States like a month ago and I've been traveling, seeing family.
Okay. So when did you got to Boise, what was that, like a week ago?
Maybe a couple
weeks ago. And I remember looking on Instagram and you said you were going to start training to ride a bike, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so tell us about this experience.
Yeah. I bought this bike in high school actually, but never rode it.
Okay.
I like got it at an auction for super cheap. That's part of the money thing too, is I always try to find the best deal.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's like this jacket, I got it for like $75 and it's, you know, like a $250 jacket or something.
Yeah.
And I always try to find the best deals. So I got this super good deal on this bike and it had just been sitting there. Okay. And I knew it. It was my only possession at my mother's house, actually. Like I got rid of everything else. And so I knew about this bike sitting there, and I knew I had a long time dream since high school to ride long distance. And my original plan, like when I was in high school, was to ride from Pocatello to Yellowstone. But I was like, man, you know, I'm in Boise now. I have my bike, and if I'm gonna do that, I need my bike in Pocatello. And so I was like, well, I could just ride to Pocatello. And I thought, oh, okay, well, I should probably, I had no idea how far you could ride in a day. So I just Googled how far can you ride a bike in a day? And people were like, oh, you could do 100 miles in a day. And I thought, okay, I could do 100 miles in a day. And so like I go on my first bike ride, I like set out early in the morning. I end up doing like 58 that day, and it was super casual and it wasn't bad. Like my body felt fine. So then the day, skipping one day, then I headed out to over the coast of the border of Oregon to Hot Springs. And so it was like 55 miles one way, and it was perfect, perfect day, you know, for another training day. So I ended up going out and things actually got really hard, but it was like the last like 30%. Yeah. And the last 30% I ran out of food, and I like didn't have any more electrolytes or carbohydrates. And the end was challenging, but also I felt better the next day after that than I did the 58 miles. Oh, wow. Yeah. So then I knew, okay, like I could totally do Pocatello in like 2 days. Then I'm like having constant flats, and like, you know, things are difficult. Like when things do get difficult, sometimes my mind wants to quit, you know. It'd be really easy. And the option, like the universe presented me with the option. Like it just so happens that like my mother's partner is driving to Pocatello the day that like the next day. So if anything, I could ride one day, and then he's going to be driving right where I'm riding, and he could pick me up. So like this like this way out was there, you know.
Yeah.
And but the excitement drives me, you know. And like I don't know why, but there's just when something's like, even when I first started riding that day, I was like, wow, what if I did 200 miles in a day? I was like, what if I rode for 24 hours straight? I don't know, like these things just excite me, you know. And so I decided not to, to catch his ride. And he actually drove by and honked his horn, and I was stoked, you know.
Really?
Yeah. So I just kept going on, and I'm quite used to sleeping anywhere now. And I just like slept out by the outside some grass off the freeway. Like there's a gas station and like this huge sign, and I found this nice spot. And I was cold. I had this habit actually recently where I think that I'm only going to go to one place, so I only bring the gear for that. But then all this other adventure comes along, and I didn't have a sleeping bag.
Oh no.
Yeah, and so I'm sleeping on the ground. Like I didn't bring my shelter either. I had like a small tarp, and instead I had, it works really well. I take like a trash bag, like a big trash bag, and you cut it down the sides and open it up, and you have something to lay on the ground. So I used this trash bag and my blanket, and I'm cold, and I wake up at 4 a.m. and it's raining.
Oh no.
Yeah. I said, oh fuck.
Yeah.
And so I go over to the gas station, and there's like this small edge underneath the roof, and I sit there, and there's actually this is all like culminated over the years, you know. I picked up this guy hitchhiking. He's the first person to introduce me to dumpster diving. And then it's just like become more casual, like boundaries just were released. But there's this trash can right there. It's like 4 a.m. I'm like, and I go over right in the top of this trash can is like this loaded fries.
Oh no.
Yeah, and I was like, and it was a fork, and it was closed, and I was like, awesome. And I just like grabbed those fries and kicked back and just started eating some loaded fries.
Oh my god.
It was great time. It was a good time. I caught like a couple extra hours of sleep, and the sun came out. The rain dried up a bit, and then I sent it out for the second day. And it turns out I did 125 miles, which is, I was like, okay, that's sick. It was the longest I'd done. And then I found out it's actually 200 kilometers, which I was so stoked about, that I'd done 2 century, like metric 2 century. And yeah, the next day went good. You know, I was on the phone with a friend, and I was stoked and thinking, like, waiting for the rain to dry. I knew that I was going to end up coming into town in the dark. And it was super cold that day too. And like I like was biking in very minimal clothing, because while I'm going, you know, my body's hot, but any break I took, I was shivering. And so I was trying to take as little breaks as possible, but just eating the entire time, you know. Every 30 minutes to an hour I'm eating like around 30 grams of carbs. And I'm constantly taking electrolytes. Ended up making like an incredible time. I arrived like 3 hours ahead of schedule, and it wasn't until I pull into Pocatello that I realized I was so high.
Really?
So high, yeah. The sun is shining, like there's incredible colors, and by this type of high I'm talking about, and the high that I was talking about earlier with eating clean, and like the high like while I'm climbing, while I'm flying. High to me is clarity, you know. It's enhanced perception, not intoxication, you know, or not like I'm not numbed, you know, but I'm like sensitive, and so like the town's amazing, and I feel like, wow, I haven't seen these streets in a long time. And I'm riding now, like I'm riding on this bike, just coming out of this different journey, and I see the same sidewalks that I rode my bike on when I was a little kid. It was great to be here and see the changes, you know, and things that are also similar.
Yeah, that's so incredible, man. Like, you are incredible for making that happen, and the sacrifices you've made in your life to make these things happen, and the goals that you set in your life to make these things happen is truly, truly incredible. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, bro.
What is next on your bucket list of things to do in your life?
Yeah, what has me excited at this moment, I'm headed out to Chicago to do some seasonal work. Some friend like landed me this gig last year. I worked a few weeks there, and this year like the bosses loved me, invited me to Thailand. That's what started my like Asia trip. And then I'm working there 2 months, headed to like do some rock climbing in Red Rock National Park in Nevada. And then the optimal like flying season during that time is in Colombia. And I met a lot of awesome pilots in Eastern Europe and India that were headed to Colombia. So in January, I'm headed to Colombia, and I'll probably stay for like 2-3 months, maybe like do some flying in Brazil and see where else it takes me. But then March, April, the PCT, if you've heard of it, it's one of the longest trails in the world. Okay. And there's 3 long hiking trails in the United States: the Pacific Crest Trail, the Appalachian Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail. Okay. And the Pacific Crest Trail goes from Mexico border to Canadian border. Okay. And it goes through all of California, Oregon, and Washington. Wow. And I've been wanting to do it. And I was going to actually do it this year, but I was in the Himalayas hiking and decided like to push it off a year and just enjoy the place I was at. Mm-hmm. And so after flying in Colombia, I'll be coming back in March, April to start the PCT. And that's part of like this running too, you know, like after I did the biking and I came here, I ran a marathon with no training. Mm-hmm. And I want to get into long distance like trail running as well. Mm-hmm. And I want to mix my long distance hiking and trail running. Yeah. And then with the flying is like I told you some of my inspirations for flying. And I want to mix rock climbing, flying, hiking all into one big mission, you know.
One thing that in my life I'm focused on, which we were talking about earlier, is, you know, like I'm not balanced, right? You know, and I work a shit ton, but I don't live like I should. So how are you able to afford to live like you should? I know that you know, are very, you know, only buy what you need. You're frugal. Out of a given year, I mean, how often do you think you work?
I've probably averaged like 1 or 2 months over the years. But 6 years ago, I worked for 6 months. It's the longest I've ever worked.
Wow.
Yeah. And then when I worked then, the money, usually I spend money, like I said, on like good quality gear or food. Yeah. And so food, the money disappears. Mm-hmm. But when I buy good quality gear and things like that I'm interested in, and I always get the best deal, then those things hold value, you know? And so the money that I made 6 years ago is still coming into my life now. Yeah. Because I buy things that hold value. They serve me for whatever time, and then I sell them. Yeah. And so everything I have is like, I like to think of things, everything that I'm wearing and everything that I have, even like the most like memorable objects, that they're all just here for a moment, you know? And then one day they'll be passed on. And even like, that's like, I have some things that are like super important to me, but the most important things are the best things to get, you know? Yeah. And so I've had like random gigs over the years, but I've bought and sold vans. Like I buy a van, build it out, live in it, and then sell it. Mm-hmm. Built the tiny houses and sold them. Motorcycles, like I like working on motorcycles, so I'll buy old motorcycles, work on them, use them, and then sell them. And then I've had like some random construction gigs and like this gig in Chicago now, and like, you know, trim some weed over the years, things like this. So I just do small jobs when it's necessary. And, you know, sometimes it can be stressful because I ride like a wave of like, I work short period, but a lot. I make money, and then I'll travel for a really long time, and slowly it goes down and down and down, and then I'm broke again. Mm-hmm. And sometimes coming to that place of not having money can be stressful. But I always need to just remind myself that the universe will provide, you know, and that the opportunities are always there. And so they are.
Yeah.
And it was in that I have my lifestyle can be quite different, and I live quite rugged, mm-hmm. and I'm frugal, and I don't work much. But it's not really about what it looks like, but that what I'm doing for me is I'm just following my heart. Mm-hmm. And doing the things that I want most. Yeah. And then I think no matter where any of us are at, mm-hmm. and whatever we're doing, as long as we're following our heart, then like we're living our life to the fullest.
Yeah.
And sometimes living, being in your hometown and having a family and a home is like, to me, because that's not the life I'm living, it also looks amazing, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because like the consistency that you have is something that I don't hold. Mm-hmm. And I admire that. But I also I can see how I've seen other people living crazy lives, and I admire it.
Yeah.
And that it's less about what it looks like, and that we're just following our truth.
Yeah.
And that's something that was important for me to share, because I've heard from people like, wow, you know, you live such a crazy life, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But I also am like, yeah, but you live a life that I couldn't.
Yeah.
And so it's good for us to just follow our heart and do the things that make us happy.
Yep. And I think that's just what's so important. I mean, I talk about balance, right? Like we were talking about earlier, just having that balance, you know, it's so important, you know, for humans to be healthy mentally, physically, and spiritually, right? Wouldn't you agree to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that I think is super crazy, I'm going to tell the camper story.
Yeah, okay.
All right. So one thing is super crazy. So my dad gifted me a camper, and I had this plan to restore and renovate it. And I get into it. I'm like, this is going to cost a lot of money. I don't have the knowledge or the carpentry knowledge to fix this thing up. So I was way in over my head. Posted on KSL, texting this gentleman, so happens to be you. Didn't even know until you pull up to my house. That was like the craziest thing ever, man.
When am I around and it just happens to be us talking to each other?
I know, man. It was so crazy. Well, I appreciate you for hopping on this today. I think there's a lot of light, a lot of bright things that you talk about. It gives people and our viewers another perspective of living life, right? Because you can have the goal of making a shit ton of money, or you can have the goal of living life to the fullest and being minimal and living frugal, which I think is, you know, a very good route to go in life, because you get to experience a lot more, right?
Yeah.
And not be so set on being in one place, right? At a given time, right? Being married to your job, essentially, right? Mm-hmm. And so I love that about you. I'm fascinated about your life. I'm really excited to see where life's going to take you, or the universe is going to take you. And I'm going to keep following you, and I'm going to keep rooting for you and keep cheering for you, man. I really appreciate you for hopping on today, brother. So
yeah, I appreciate you too. I'm glad you got me out here.
Yes, sir.